So in the previous video, we talked about one nonverbal communication style difference which creates problems in the workplace, which is the range of emotions. Now we're going to look at how much silence should people have during a conversation. In a typical conversation in Canada, the pattern goes like this. One person speaks, there's a little silence, which means over to you, I'm done. And we go back and forth like a ping pong game. If you've worked with people from East Asia, you've noticed that on average, Japanese, Chinese, or Koreans in the workplace leave much longer silences. These silences to people in East Asia means you have said something very important. I need to think about it. I need to reflect, and then I will start thinking about my own answer. When Canadians have conference calls with Japanese people, for example, this difference leads Canadians pretty much at least once a call to ask them, are you there? Because we asked a question and the silence is so long that we interpret it as the line is down. To Japanese people, the behavior of the average Canadian implies you are not giving any consideration to what I said. On the other side, we have Latin people. To Canadians, it looks like everybody in Latin cultures speaks at the same time. The idea in Latin cultures is this: as soon as I understand where you're going, I will start speaking to show you how engaged I am. So this comes across to the average Canadian as being rude, interrupting, finishing your sentences. That's not the intention, but that is the impact. So again, we have a huge difference between impact and intention. How do we deal with it? Well, number one, be patient with people who need longer silent gaps. Here, I'm thinking of organizations. If you have a meeting, you have people who follow this pattern, people who follow that pattern. These people will quite often be the ones speaking the most because these people are waiting for the silence to be long enough for them to say something. And sooner or later, these people will be considered, well, we don't need them, they don't contribute in a meeting. So it can create a lot of challenges in organizations. This creates particularly problems during job interviews, because if somebody who speaks like this interviews somebody who speaks like that, then this person is likely, if they're not careful, to speak the whole time. Because every time the silence gets a little too long by their standards, they start speaking. They will rephrase their question as a way to prime the candidate, or they will try to answer it on behalf of the candidate as a way to prime the candidate. The problem is, for the candidate, it means you just took a breath and you started speaking again. I need to wait until you're done for it to be my turn. So it is important, in my experience, to leave long enough silences during interviews for the applicant to know it's their turn. And particularly during telephone interviews, set that up front. Make the person understand that you will wait for them to answer. For example, you could say, well, I appreciate that you may need to collect your thoughts before you start answering my question. Don't worry, I'll wait for you to start speaking. In team meetings, I want to encourage you to use the round table approach. So you go around the table and you ask everybody in turn, what do you think? I found this approach very effective when I was doing conference calls with people in Mexico City, Toronto, and Frankfurt. If you remember the slide when we discussed visible and invisible differences, when I was working with that team at P&G. Because if we didn't use the roundtable approach, our Mexican colleagues would typically jump in before our German colleagues were done. Withhold judgment if people appear to be taking over the conversation. So many Latin people are perceived as trying to take over or trying overbearing. That's usually not their intention, but that is the impact. Try to mirror people's communication style. So when I interact with people in East Asia, I try to slow myself down. When I go to Europe, Latin Europe, I don't, I will go and speak even when the person is not finished. The idea is try to, when in Rome, do as the Roman in essence, okay? Move in their direction as opposed to the opposite direction. And finally, there are times where you may have to say, like, I have an important point, please let me finish. So there are times when you will need to explain your conversation style preference.